Welcome to Break the Cycle with Bethany Dotson, the podcast for high achieving professional women who struggle with codependency, attracting emotionally unavailable partners, and who repeat dysfunctional patterns in love. I'm your host, Bethany Dotson, and if you want to learn more about how to break your cycle in love, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and be the first to know when a new episode drops. I'll see you inside. So today I want to talk about a very important subject, and this is how to stop ruminating about your ex and move on fully with your life and also fall wildly in love with your life. And I'm going to give you a strategy, a concept that I teach inside Break the Cycle with my clients later on in this chat today, this episode. But I wanted to first, talk about some mistakes or pitfalls where I see a lot of women getting stuck. Because if you have had the misfortune of getting into a narcissistic relationship, you realize how hard those are to break. And those relationships are often very much like an addiction. You probably sensed things were not right very early on, right away in the relationship, but there was some part of your brain and your body that told you to keep going anyway. And I was talking with someone recently who had a wonderful career in healthcare and had never had a healthy relationship. She was close to 60 and hadn't been on a date in 3 years, and in that 3-year time frame, she still thought about her toxic exes on a regular basis, if not daily. So I just want to convey that this can really chew up many years of your life, even long after you leave the relationship. So, first and foremost, one of the biggest mistakes that I see women make when they are trying to stop ruminating and move forward is that they get stuck in the research phase. They get stuck in binge researching anything and everything she can get her hands on in terms of what a narcissist is. And is the narcissist going to hoover me this time? Is he dating somebody new? What is he going to gaslight the new person? So there tends to be this obsession with research and learning everything that you can. I just had somebody reach out to me earlier today who I'm researching everything that I'm researching. I'm really wanting to learn more about it. And while that's okay in the beginning, that's not going to heal your trauma and that's not going to heal the brain wiring in you that is causing you to be prone or vulnerable to these types of relationships to begin with. So, what happens when you start researching is that you're essentially firing and wiring you're thinking the same thoughts in your mind, you're firing and wiring the same circuit in your brain, and your body is having the same emotional reaction as if you were possibly in the relationship. Even though you're not, when you read an article about the narcissist, you get an emotional payoff. You get to be right, they get to be wrong. You get to feel a little excited. You get to feel a little on edge. You get a jolt of adrenaline. You get a jolt of serotonin. You get a jolt of cortisol. You probably feel stressed out for a little bit and may even go down the rabbit hole of why did I stay so long? God, I'm such an idiot, and like beating yourself up. So, what happened when you research is that while on one hand, you get a little bit of insight, on the other hand, you're really firing and wiring the same programming in your brain and your body that makes you vulnerable to these relationships to begin with. So you're not actually healing anything. You're getting some insight, but you're not actually rewiring your psychology and breaking that pattern that's in your psyche and in your body and your subconscious mind that's prone to these types of relationships. So that's the first mistake that I see a lot of women make. They really get stuck in focusing their attention outward on what their ex did to them. And the irony with that is that they spent many years in that relationship focusing their attention outward on what their ex was doing wrong or wasn't doing in the relationship or when the next fight would be. or if they were going to make it to the holidays this time, or if they were going to break up and get back together again. So for attention or focusing on if he only fixed his anger issues or if he only stopped drinking, then we could be in a good relationship. When you spend a lot of time researching narcissism, your focus is out here away from yourself. And in the relationship that you left, your focus was out here on your partner and not inwardly on yourself. You were abandoning yourself in that relationship. And that is usually stems from childhood trauma or some kind of early life conditioning that makes people prone to doing that. But when you are focused out here, you don't learn the necessary skill set that will break your cycle of being focused in here. So again, research, it's like a quick, cheap, easy payoff. It's like buying a new pair of shoes and then a month later, you're not really wearing them. It's like the newness wore off. It's okay. It gives you a little bit of insight, but it's not a research based method for healing trauma. It's really not going to move the needle long term. You might get some validation and you might feel a payoff of my ex was an asshole and I'm the right one. I didn't do anything wrong. So you have to start turning that lens and that mirror in towards yourself and asking yourself, what is it within me that is causing this to keep happening in my life? Because normally this type of pattern happens from relationship to relationship to relationship. And unfortunately, there are many, many women, too many women out there that allow this to go on for their entire lives. And they just resign themselves to the fact that this is just how it is and relationships are just not for them. And I'm just not even going to bother with it, which is sad because there is always hope and there's definitely a way to change that. The second mistake that I see a lot of women make is they go to therapy. They do a lot of therapy actually, and this is what any person, educated person would do. I think I need to go see a therapist. But when they go to therapy, they wind up venting about their ex. So while they might not be in front of their phone or their computer screen researching narcissism, they are venting about their ex. And this is not necessarily a bad thing because when you're venting, usually, things, life events happen over that week when you are before your therapy session and you go to your therapy session that week and you unload about what happened and what your ex did this time and all that kind of stuff. And then for a moment, you feel better. And then a few days go by and stuff starts piling up in your emotional tank and you start getting triggered and, well, and you can't wait to bring this to your therapist. And then you go to your therapist and you vent. And you get all off your chest and you feel good for a moment, but then you go right back out. And unfortunately, and I've talked to hundreds and hundreds of women at this point who have spent, and I'm personally one of these people who spent many years in therapy, psychoanalyzing their childhood, talking about their ex, talking about their work problems. And they still went out and wound up in another abusive relationship. And often the abusive relationships that they wound up in again was even more abusive than the ones before. And this is after 5 years of talk therapy. So they're talking about it. They have a logical understanding of where the pattern comes from, why they're doing it, but they go out and still get into the same dysfunctional pattern again. And a lot of times I find that it's worse. So when you're talking about your past, and this has been proven in trauma research within the last decade, when what studies have shown is that when you are analyzing your past in the rearview mirror, when you're talking about your past and trying to pick apart pieces in the rearview mirror, and this is essentially all that you're doing, you are ultimately reinforcing and refiring the same circuits in your brain that cause you to get into unhealthy relationships. So you're talking about it, and all your brain is doing is refiring and rewiring the same circuitry that causes you to get into bad relationships. When I work with my clients, one of the things that I have them do is give me their 3-year vision and write in great detail about what they really want in juicy detail and get very specific and make it emotional and get very, very into that experience and really feel the experience of already having that. And a large majority of people who do that have a really hard time because they are so emotionally conditioned to struggle and to living in anxiety and to feeling on edge all the time and to constantly thinking about their ex and walking on eggshells and all this kind of stuff and being hyper vigilant. And while it feels good to talk to somebody and feel heard and feel validated, those things are essentially important. Over time in cognitive behavioral therapy, what studies have shown specifically for complex trauma survivors, and complex trauma is the type of trauma that happens in the container of a relationship, whether it was a parent-child relationship or as you're an adult now it's an intimate relationship. When it comes to to healing complex trauma and rewiring the circuitry in your brain, cognitive behavioral therapy, otherwise known as talk therapy, is not a proven method for healing that kind of trauma. It helps, but it doesn't ultimately lead, in my experience doing this work, to making healthy relationship choices in future relationships. So that's number two. Venting and about it in therapy, but you still find yourself drifting off to the past or worse, repeating the pattern again in the future. The last and final mistake that I want to talk about is a lot of women, when they leave these relationships, their bodies are so used to feeling on edge all the time and so used to anxiety and chaos and even anger that they unconsciously recreate scenarios in their lives so that they can feel those anxious feelings. Their body gets habituated to feeling anxious, to feeling on edge, to feeling chaotic, to feeling overwhelmed, to feeling like she never has enough time. And this is essentially living in a daily state of fight or flight. She might get a break when she falls asleep, if she's even sleeping well, but she's essentially living in fight or flight every single day. And over time, when you are living in fight or flight and your stress hormones are elevated more than they need to be, that causes your immune system to get weak. And so I work a lot with women who also have autoimmune disorders. Their body is literally attacking itself and not functioning properly because they've had so much abuse in the past and so much trauma. And even though they're out of that relationship years later, their body still believes that it's happening. And this is one of the reasons why researching about it and venting to your therapist about it doesn't fully get you to a healthy relationship, because on some level, your body still thinks that chaos and walking on eggshells feels normal. It feels normal to do that in relationship. So you have to be using your body in the healing picture, specifically with relational or complex trauma, really any kind of trauma that you experience, because working with your body directly helps to reprogram the circuitry in your brain. So let's talk about what's really going on when you're still ruminating. Most of the time, when women are ruminating, they have a lot of unresolved feelings of guilt, of sadness, of anger, even. There is a loss when you leave that type of a relationship, no matter how abusive it was. And a lot of women find it a little easier to keep focusing on what their ex did to them or their ex's pathological behavior or venting to their therapist or being a workaholic as a way to avoid the sense of loss and avoid the feelings that she has likely shoved down for many years in order to survive that relationship. So, when you get stuck in a pattern of ruminating, there's an aspect of yourself that is suppressing the emotions that really need to be processed and let go of. It's similar to an alcoholic. A lot of alcoholics are people that, essentially in their brain, they have wiring conducive to addictive traits, risk taking behavior, obsessive behavior, novelty seeking, things like this that tend to make somebody prone to being an alcoholic. And there are a lot of people that have addictions that are able to go through years of their life with normalcy. And then one thing happens, a stressor, a loss of some sort, a death in the family, a loss of a job, loss of money, loss of a wife and kids. These things start to pile up. And instead of properly dealing with those feelings, they turn to addictive behavior. So if you find yourself ruminating, essentially that is fueling your addiction to a toxic person over time. And that's really not healing the deeper feelings that need to be worked through and let go of so that you can start reprogramming your mind and your body to have a great relationship. So one of the methods that we use in Break the Cycle is a process called riding the wave. So if you can imagine that you're in front of the ocean, you're watching the waves roll in, your emotions on a daily basis happen, and most people are largely unconscious of this, but it's what we help our clients become more aware of so that they can make healthier relationship decisions in the future. Your emotions kind of start off like a wave. It's down here for a little bit. Something happens in your environment or a thought goes by in your mind, and it causes your feelings to start to escalate a little bit. You escalate. And what happens for most people is that instead of allowing themselves to feel that feeling all the way through to the end and for that wave to decrease over time, people will reach a certain point where they feel their feelings, they feel their feelings, they feel their feelings. And then they are scared of what the other side looks like and they hop off that wave. And when they hop off of that wave, they tend to do things like ignoring red flags. They tend to open a bottle of wine. They tend to get on their phone. They tend to research narcissism. They tend to see if their ex texted them for the 50th time that day. So they're not actually being fully with their feelings. And if you find that you get with people who are emotionally unavailable, it's because there is an aspect of yourself that is emotionally unavailable. You're not fully available for your own emotion. And one of the primary reasons, quite likely, is that you have a very pervasive pattern of ignoring your own feelings by researching the narcissist, venting about everybody else in therapy, and becoming a workaholic or distracting yourself with chronic busyness. So, when you notice that you're having a feeling, what I often invite clients to do is to just notice that feeling is there. Notice where it's happening, where they sense that sensation in their body, and then giving themselves a few moments to simply be with that feeling and allow whatever happens to happen. This is a lot easier said than done. I will just say that it's a lot easier said than done, especially when you've spent 10 or 20 years ignoring bad behavior, making excuses for bad behavior, minimizing red flags, justifying your partner's toxic behavior, justifying why you're staying in the relationship. That justification and excuse making process can become addictive in itself. And it's like an alcoholic saying, oh, well, if I have like 4 drinks every night, that really doesn't make me an alcoholic. Justification. So when you are used to overriding your feelings for a prolonged period of time, like as in decades, it is very challenging at first to truly feel your feelings and be with them all the way through and not hop off the wave. So, riding the wave is a process that we use here. And then once clients become aware of what they're feeling in their body, they're then invited to notice where that sensation is happening in their body. Maybe they need to take a couple of deep breaths around it. It's not breathing to try to get rid of the feeling. It's just breathing to relax into that feeling and then allowing themselves to be with that feeling fully. So, just to quickly recap how to stop ruminating over your ex, fall wildly in love with your own life, and really move forward. How to break your addiction to obsessing about somebody else that was toxic and is bad for you, but you keep hoping maybe that he's going to come back. Number one is look at what you're doing right now. Are you researching obsessively? Are you constantly talking about it to your friends and family and your therapist? I worked with someone who had been divorced. She was out of a 25-year relationship with someone who had narcissistic traits. She had been out of that divorce, fully moved out. He had gotten married and moved on. It had been 2 years and she could barely function in her day-to-day basis. She was just like living in a fog. And she went to work, she took care of things that needed to be taken care of in her day-to-day life, but she every single day constantly researched narcissism. And what this was doing was it was just reprogramming her brain. It was just keeping that trauma circuit alive in her brain and in her body. Then she would go to the grocery store. She would go out to eat. She would go have dinner with friends. She would go visit her family. And everything that came out of her mouth was about her ex. She could not stop talking about her ex. And again, this was her body's way of trying to get it fixed to chaos and drama because she wasn't truly allowing herself to work through her deeper feeling underneath. She was more addicted to the coping strategies and the justification and the blame game and all that kind of stuff. So, venting about it will not stop your pattern. Venting about it will probably perpetuate it. And venting about it will absolutely not cause you to have a healthy relationship in the future because you're essentially not working deep enough and rewiring the circuitry in your brain and the feeling states, the circuitry that goes on in your body because it's your connected that will cause you to have a healthy relationship. You're just talking about it and refire the same stuff. And the last one is turning to work. A lot of women that I work with are strong, they're driven, they're ambitious, they're goal oriented, they have professional careers, they're successful in that area of their life. But when you take a little closer look, they're often workaholics. They often take too much responsibility in their work life. They feel underappreciated, undervalued, just like they did in romantic relationships. And they turn to work because it's a distraction. If you're used to feeling on edge and overwhelmed in relationship, it only makes sense that you're probably going to do that over here because often how you do one thing is how you do everything or other things. So, in order to overcome this, essentially, just to stop ruminating, is to be aware of when you want to be aware of your feelings, when they're happening. Notice when you start to hop off the wave. And instead of hopping off the wave and turning to an article or turning to your friend to bitch about your ex or turning to work or turning to mindlessly scrolling your phone and being a zombie on social media, what am I feeling right now? What's really going on for me? Where am I feeling that in my body? What do I need to do? Can I be with that feeling fully and not do anything about it or not try to make it go away? And again, this sounds really simple. It's actually challenging to put into practice on a consistent basis. And it's one of the things that I help my clients do when they join Break the Cycle is help them rewire their psychiatry, their circuitry in their brain, their psychology, their inner world that's causing them to outwardly manifest these bad relationships. And often this inner world has a lot of trauma in it. And they've done a lot of good things to help themselves heal that. They've gotten a great career, they've gotten an education, they've gotten into therapy, they've read some books, they've taken time off dating, they go on dates, it's still the same thing keeps happening. So being consistent is ultimately the key. And this is something that I tell my clients. So if you recognize that you are more consistent at ignoring things and avoidance, and you're more consistent at overriding your intuition in relationships, and you're more consistent at people pleasing and having a hard time using your voice in a conflict setting in relationship because you don't want to make the person feel bad. You don't want to be seen as a certain type of person, et cetera, et cetera. And you're professional. And this pattern in your intimate relationships has probably followed you around for your entire adult life. And you know that you can't keep doing that. And you also know that shutting yourself off from love and relationships would be a sad existence. If you know that you don't want that future and you do want a future where you feel confident in yourself again, you feel confident in relationships, you feel confident in your ability to attract a healthy relationship. Most of the women that I work with, at least in the beginning, feel terrified of dating because rightfully so. Every time they thought they've gotten it right, it's been another asshole. So if that's you and you know that you don't want to keep doing that anymore, then book a call and we will have a very honest conversation about changing the rest of your life. You can go to bethanydotson.com/talk, book a free call. You'll be forwarded to an application that's going to give me some insight. It's also going to give you insight as you complete that. And then we'll hop on the phone and see if we can help you heal this pattern that's been plaguing your love life, heal your trauma, your codependency, sometimes your love addiction, and help you ultimately get into the relationship that you want. And we'll talk to you soon. Take care. Thank you for tuning in to today's show. A brand new episode drops each week. Be sure to click and subscribe. And remember, healing trauma, codependency, and your lifelong pattern in love does not happen by itself. You need expert guidance and evidence-based methods. And I have helped hundreds of incredible women from all over the country heal betrayal trauma and reclaim their confidence while falling wildly in love with their own lives and attracting healthy relationships. If you like what you heard today and you want to see if you're fit to work with us, go to bethanydotson.com/talk. That's bethanydotson.com/talk and book a call to speak with us today. We'll get on the phone for about 45 minutes and get you crystal clear on 3 things. The real reason you keep attracting dysfunctional relationships, even if you know better or even if you've done tons of work on yourself. What you really want in a relationship, how you want to feel emotionally every single day in your life, and what lifestyle changes you want to make. And then number 3, the exact strategy you need to be using to get there. Again, healing trust issues, codependency, and a lifelong pattern does not happen without expert guidance. We've helped hundreds of women across the country heal complex trauma, codependency, and have the healthiest relationships ever, both with themselves and with others. Go to bethanydotson.com/talk to book your call today. I'll see you on the next episode.